topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Diversity Talk. I am Wendy. It's Wednesday, and I'm coming to you from, of course, New York City, where I broadcast from. As many of you know, Triversity, the Pride Center, is located in Milford, Pennsylvania. We serve as the rural areas of the tri-state area, but I am here in New York, and actually, I've changed my location in my apartment because I am having construction done. So I'm feeling a little bit, little challenged in my new location, which is a room that doesn't really work for me, but I am going to make it work for you tonight because spring is in the air. That's right. Finally, we waited for it and it's here. And, I was thinking to myself, spring is here. The days are longer. The days are lighter. The temperature is better. What could I do to make spring really spring? And I thought I need to have a really fun guest on, one that is willing to shed their clothing, put their light attitude on, and bring happiness and the new season into your lives. So tonight I have a very special guest, somebody I knew about for a bit. This person has done many interviews where they're the interviewer. And as a matter of fact, a number of my friends have been on their show. Their show is, how can I put it? They interview people in the bathtub. That's right. And the show is called Tub Talks with Damon. But there's a lot more to Damon than just all these suds and rubber duckies. So put your hands together for Damon L. Jacobs. Oh my God. Aren't you having a grand old time in the tub?
I am having a great day in the tub for all the reasons you said, Wendy. It's spring. We're here. And if you're unsettled and you need a tub and want to come hang out with me, come to hang out in my tub.
Yes. Well, I was looking at your YouTube. You've had many a person come and join you in the tub, right? You're not always solo in the tub. Am I correct?
I'm typically with a guest, almost always, unless there's some sort of message that I have. But it's about 175 episodes of me with some of the most amazing people in the world. Most of them, of course, are New Yorkers. People who are moving and shaking the world and contributing to the health and happiness of our community in one way or another.
I totally love that because that is what I'm about. That's what I try and do nationwide, except you do something I don't do. You make sure they're coming clean.
Good, clean fun here in the tub.
So have you ever had a guest agree to come on the show and then at the last minute get wet feet? I was going to say cold feet. I'm sorry, there's jokes available here. Have you ever had that happen?
Yeah, a couple of times. The thing is, this is an environment where we're pretty close together and I'm a pretty warm person. And sometimes people disclose more than what they were intending to. So on a couple of occasions, I've had guests that have disclosed something personal, which in the moment felt very right for them. But later on, they were like, oh my God, I can't believe I said that. Or no one knows I'm HIV positive. I don't really feel comfortable with sharing that with the world, even though I felt comfortable sharing that with you in the tub. So of course, when people have those, when people tell me, I respect their boundaries first and foremost.
Absolutely. So before we come clean here, I just keep rolling these out as they occur to me. Your background is you are an actual therapist. You really do help people. And I really admire that. I did not know that about you, of course, until I got your bio in. I just, I thought you were another funny podcaster that did something really cool. but you are really out there helping people. You're a licensed marriage and family therapist, and you offer all different kinds of therapies. So I'd like to know a little bit about the other side.
Sure. So in my real life, I mean, what I actually do most of the day and night is work in my office in Manhattan at 26 and Broadway. I have been working as a therapist for 28 years.
I can't believe, come on, you do. It must be all these baths that keep you looking the way you do.
Well, and I love, thank you. I love what I do, and the baths, are helpful. But I think when we love, you look beautiful, Wendy, as always. And I think when we're really living our lives authentically and living life on purpose fully, that shows, right? It shows outwardly when we are keeping the inward light flowing. But I love the work I get to do. Really, Wendy, this is the only thing I've ever wanted to do as a child. When I was 5 years old, I set up a stand in my parents' living room and told everybody who came in the house that they could tell me their problems, and I would try to help them. This is really like my calling in this world. And so I feel so blessed and fortunate. I get to do what I love almost every day.
That's hilarious that you were 5 years old, and but you know what? I've met kids like that. And you say that, oh, that kid is going to grow up to be a shrink, because you can really see it at an early age. I guess you're a good listener, right? You have to be a good listener.
I think so. I hope so. I mean, I feel like I am. I hope I am. But, I'm also human. And I know that I don't have there's some days I'm there 100% and some days I'm like 70%. And that's part of the art and craft. I think whether we're doing healthcare or artistry or acting, it's like, okay, bring your A game every time. But if you can't do it, then do your best to bring bring your B game, bring your B plus game if you can't bring your A game for some reason.
Well, I'm going to jump in then with a question that I thought about a lot, because my daughter brought it up. She had a few different therapists. She noticed during when she changed therapists, and it was in the pandemic and we were all Zooming, she would get therapists that would be like, she's pouring her heart out and the person is looking at the cat or looking away from the screen. Like, I know what you're saying about you got to bring your A game, but sometimes you can only bring the game that you can bring. But, in terms of like how a patient ends up feeling, don't you think it makes them feel less than?
I think that it is, the way I was trained in the
Yes.
San Francisco Bay Area is that the present space is sacred and we treat it as a sacred space. That means you're not distracted. That means you're doing what you need to do to not be distracted. I did some virtual during the pandemic, but I also kept my office open at 26 and Broadway. I did not stop seeing people in person because to me, there's just so much energy and magic that lives in that here and now space. But I have to be aware on Zoom, because I am more distractible when I'm looking at a screen. That is so important to me in my integrity as a provider, is to give that full focused attention.
Right.
That's how I was trained. That's how I was raised in this field, is to do that.
Well, thank you for being, I'll use the word, such a mensch in the way you approach human beings. It's really, really important. I have to tell you my own experience with Zooming. I don't see a therapist, and my husband passed away a year ago, and I wanted to just join like a grief support group. That was all I was asking for. Do you know, Damon, I couldn't find one that met in person. Look at your expression. I've told me that is so pathetic. I made over 60 calls, and I got calls, of course, from, a lot of these organizations, the organizations and all of that. They're following up, and they say in that very condescending voice, how are you doing? You know what I'm saying? And nobody could find an in-person support group for me. This is New York. That is really pathetic. I actually found one that I couldn't go to, one in Long Island and one in New Jersey, maybe because people can get in their cars and drive there. But New York City, not to have that. How could we not?
That to me is really disappointing, especially given the times we're living in, and even outside of the times we're living in. People we love they die. They die of things we can predict. They die of things we can't predict. And
right?
We, community support in person, in my opinion, is one of the most powerful ways to move through trauma and grief.
Absolutely. And I can tell in your training that is very, very important to you. Now, I have to bring up the pandemic, because all of a sudden it seemed anyone who was a therapist hung out a shingle and they were all making a fortune. And prior to that time, it was not that easy. What was your experience during the pandemic and what did you find that you could offer people?
Well, first of all, I was really glad if this ever had to happen in my lifetime, that it happened later. Because if there was ever a way, after working for 20 years, more than 20 years, to be prepared is when prepared could be. How you go through something as a person who's going through something while you're also functioning as a therapist going through the same thing,
Right.
was and is and remains a challenge. I would never do virtual work before 2020. I would never do on emergencies. I do phone calls, like old-fashioned phone calls, but I
Of
never did
course.
virtual Zoom sessions before. And maybe that was short-sighted because I started doing them during the crisis, and I didn't. The people who wanted to work with me, the people who felt safe with me, I have a specialty working with polyamorous couples, and there was a lot of turbulence and a lot of polyamorous pods during the pandemic in terms of people who, the rules and the boundaries around even just leaving the house, forget sex. We're talking about just like leaving the house or cuddling with somebody who you've been intimate with. There was so much fear and trepidation around that when people wanted to work with me on that level, I wasn't going to say no, even if they were in a different state. So I
Right.
continued to work actively with people throughout the pandemic. And honestly, from a business point of view, it did open up some opportunities that I hadn't had before. It did fill in some time slots that had been open before that. I'm very hyper at night, and I'm willing to work later at
You're
night.
hyper? Come
Oh,
on.
oh yeah. So as night goes on, I have more energy, and that
Yeah.
actually fit well for the couples and the families I was serving, and that also fit well because I'm both licensed in New York and California. It's an inactive license legally in California, but I do practice there virtually with some people who I've seen
Yeah,
in New York.
because I think that that's brilliant, though. Thank you for bringing that out because if someone does want virtually, you're right. If you're licensed in both places, you can practice in both places. So, what was challenging for you during the pandemic with your patients?
Well, for a lot of my clients, the really difficult issue for a lot of them was the difficulty of being isolated and alone. A lot of my clients
Right.
are gay queer men in New York City who are not in a primary partnership, and just
So
what it
it's
was like to
isolating and
go
alone.
from
Yeah.
being connected to being physically disconnected from other people. And for a lot of my clients who lived through the AIDS crisis, it was a return to being afraid of touching someone. That's something we never wanted to go back to. As you know, those of us who lived through that time, we went through the 80s and part of the 90s terrified
Right.
often to touch other people and love and have sex and become intimate with other people. To have to go back to a time when you think about your life, when you're just getting together to hug
So,
somebody, never wanted to return to that. So there was a lot of PTSD in my community, as well as that isolation. Part of the reason why I kept my office open is because some of my clients were at far greater risk of isolation than they were of COVID. And it was just that once a week opportunity to have a human connection that many were really prioritizing more at that time.
right.
But
Oh,
I'm in
it's
that group too. I did not ever want to go back to that experience of being afraid to touch people.
right.
I still don't.
So, okay, so we can talk then about the new mandates that are being put through right under this new administration, and if things like PrEP become next to impossible to get. Have you had any clients talk to you about that? The fear and trepidation of going back, because you mentioned it, going back to where we were before, not only because of the pandemic, but the inability to be able to access PrEP.
So let's talk about what's actually happening with PrEP,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of discussion, and sometimes people I think are afraid and maybe don't understand what we're talking about in terms of the legal stakes.
Yes.
Right now, at this moment, and since January of 2014, anyone who is covered under Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act, their provider was mandated to provide PrEP. There was no room for disagreement or moral disagreement or shame.
Mandatory.
None of that. If you were covered
Right.
under Obama plan or an Affordable Care Act plan, your provider had to provide PrEP. No ifs, ands, or buts. The question that's being held in the courts of Texas now is that if a state says this goes against our moral beliefs, we don't want to support the buggery, the sinful, pleasure between men, and we don't want to enable or support that, we don't want to have to pay for PrEP. That's the legal question that's coming up. And as we know with the current administration, if that reaches the Supreme Court, we know what they're going to say. They're going to
Right.
agree with the state's rights to say no to covering PrEP through the Affordable Care Act. That's where we're at. So for people who live in states where, typically the blue states, the Democratic states where PrEP is widely implemented and accessible, you're still going to be able to get it through your state ACA plan and through the general employment insurance plans, like, the emblem plans, the
Yeah,
Blue
yeah.
Cross.
The regular
Question
stuff.
is, the thing that's on the chopping block is states who decide we don't want to use ACA money to fund PrEP. And what are those folks going to do? Well, believe me, there's always ways we can get PrEP. And it's far easier now than it was 15 years ago, because now one of the main drugs for PrEP is called Truvada, which is generic. So it's very easy. It's not
There's ways
totally,
around it.
but it's easier to get than it was when it was still on brand. And it was the only drug 15 years ago, before we had ACA, that was a really, really, really hard drug to get your hands on. Now it's generic. Now it's out there. So even if you're in a state where you can't immediately get it, there are many, many ways to still get it across states and outside of the US that are very cheap.
Right. What is the quality of the PrEP outside of the states? For instance, if, Mexico, let's just say somebody tries to bring it in from Mexico, what is the quality of it?
Right. So there are 6 verified international suppliers that we talk about frequently in a group
Can we
that
talk about them on the show, please?
That what?
Okay, let's talk about those verified suppliers.
Yeah. So there is I Want PrEP in the UK, and they went and independently bought PrEP from 6 different suppliers in various parts of the country, and they tested them. They went into a lab and said, are these real products? And found that of these 6 pharmacies that they tested, they were all consistently generic drugs that worked for PrEP.
Yes.
Now, the thing we have to remember, Wendy, is that everywhere else in the world outside the US, generics are the norm. They are the standard. It was only in the United States that Truvada as a brand drug was protected and crazy expensive. Everywhere else in the world, PrEP was available in generic form prior to the ACA passing.
But you can also go and buy these things at a counter in foreign countries. You can get things like this. You don't have to go to a doctor and have an expensive visit, which there are people that aren't covered. Okay. You can go and just buy it, and it's generic, and it's not going to break the pocketbook. I think what makes me very gun shy about everything going on, because I lived through the AIDS era.
Yeah.
What if, you're right, there's enough blue states, but you know what? What if you're 16 years old and you can't travel to a blue state?
Right. So
So
for now, we're still going to have telehealth. So again, the great thing about the times we live in, there's 3 major national suppliers, QCare, Nurix, and Mister, all provide telehealth PrEP nationally. And between the 3 of them, I believe all 50 states are covered right now. Right. And they have people on their teams that help you if you are having insurance issues or having insurance barriers. They often help navigate you through that. So that's not going away.
Information, Damon, accessible to most people? Like I'm talking, let's talk about Pennsylvania or upstate New York or rural New Jersey. How does this 16 or 17-year-old find out about it?
So New York is one of the great states, the best states to get
Right.
PrEP in, because it is FDA approved for anyone who is an adolescent, anyone who is of age and wants PrEP. That's national, that's federal, is the FDA approval. So if you're living in a state like New York or California or Washington or Illinois,
you're fine, but what if you're in Pennsylvania? Let's talk Pennsylvania.
So I believe Pennsylvania also is a very blue-leaning state medically, and that there are clinics like Philadelphia Fights. I know the Philadelphia area has really great clinics, but if you're not sure what to do, if you're in Pennsylvania, you can always put in your zip code in Google, type HIV PrEP in your zip code, and see what comes up. Because a lot of times you're going to see something right in your area, or perhaps a few counties away.
So are you saying, like, if someone's in a rural area of Pennsylvania, they could go to Philadelphia or Harrisburg and obtain PrEP?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, depending on your insurance, you could go to any state, though some insurances are state-based.
Right.
But a lot of states, like it's the state of, if you have the Affordable Care Act and you're in the state of Pennsylvania, you go to any place in Pennsylvania.
Right. And get it no matter what.
Yeah.
Interesting. I really appreciate you sharing this background with me because I have people asking me these questions. I don't have to tell you, every day people are freaking out about another thing. And you, if anyone would know it better than anyone else, your phone must be ringing off the wall.
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, again, although this is something that's happening right now, the fear of having barriers to HIV treatment and HIV prevention is nothing new. I have been working in that field for 30 plus years, and there's always a way, but you have to find out and ask questions. Again, I started an international group on Facebook called PrEP, which is still there today, so that anybody in the world, depending on where they are, could find and access PrEP and get it from a reliable source if they are ordering generics somewhere.
And could you repeat the name of the Facebook group again, please?
It's called PrEP, Facts, F-A-C-T-S, Rethinking HIV Prevention and Sex.
Great.
Because instead of the sky is falling approach to healthcare, let's see what we do have. Let's use the tools we do have available. And again, going back to the 90s and antiretrovirals, there are always ways to get antiretrovirals, which means HIV treatment. But sometimes it does mean having to be like medic to really pursue the connections, go out of the country or import from out of the country. But there are ways. Typically, we don't have to do that with HIV treatment and prevention in this country. But you know what? Like you said, we might be going in that direction. So let's be
right. I like your positive approach. And you're very much saying where there's a will, there's a way.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
What about those states that are attempting to ban hormones for transgender people?
Oh, well, that is enough. I mean, so that I'm not.
What's the workaround with that? Because that is just unreal.
That is unreal, and it's terrible, and it's psychologically traumatic and devastating.
Thank you. Psychologically, I mean, people are freaking out to begin with right now, not just over what we're talking about here, just general health care, right? And what's going to happen with Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, the whole thing. What about a person that's been on hormones for 30 years and then all of a sudden they're hearing their hormones are going to be cut off? I don't even understand how that could be allowed to be legal. That's like killing somebody.
I mean, it seems to go against everything that we learn in medicine about, do no harm. Above all, do no harm. And cutting somebody off from life-saving meds is harmful.
Right.
Look, I don't know how that's going to play out. I do know, again, the trans community is very, very smart, very, very savvy, and that there's often underground ways to get what you need.
Yeah.
And I would say I'm probably not the best person to speak to that. But if you do Google or if you go out in your community and ask people who you trust.
Well, yeah, that is what people are doing now. But I remember the days not too long ago of knowing people that were the girls that walked the stroll, I'll just say, getting hormones that God only knows what they had in them,
Right. Sometimes those were not safe.
They weren't safe. Okay. And we don't want to go back to that,
No, I mean, same thing with reproductive rights. And, we don't want to go back to a time when women's lives were being harmed or endangered or,
I know, but,
the need for abortion that was not accessible in their area. So these are conversations that we absolutely need to be having. And what's interesting about this time is that we do have this in common: HIV treatment, prevention, trans rights, women's rights, reproductive rights. Right. They want to strip away all of that from us. And that means there's going to be greater resistance to that.
Right. So you are such a tub of knowledge. With all that are you involved in the political arena for any of this?
I mean, yes and no. I mean, yes, I'm very involved. No, I'd say no, because right now I'm kind of a solo agent, not with any organization. I spent a fair amount of time in Pennsylvania, actually, Luzerne County, before the election.
I know it well.
With PA Democrats, which is to knock on doors and try to have conversations and try to engage people in ways that might lend itself to them voting in favor of compassion and human rights, trying to help people understand the implications of Project 2025 and how it was going to play out if Trump won. And now exactly, we are seeing everything that Project 2025 promised play out under the current Trump administration. So that's the kind of activism I enjoy, is the door-to-door knocking and the subtle, the respectful conversations with people who may think differently or might be leaning toward a direction differently than my own. I will be doing that again in the midterms and in the.
I figured that was going to be my next question.
Yeah.
And we, of course, have Pike County Dems, we have PC Dems. These, believe it or not, in Pike County, we have a number of Democrat groups now. When I came there 25 years ago, we didn't. Now we do have them, and I have to say, including the people in Triversity, not only knocking on doors, they're calling their senators, they're out there with signs. They really are working, and they make every attempt that they can to try and influence. These are the influencers. I have to tell you the frustration in all of this. I'm going to give you the other side because I know the other side. Being in media, I'm privy to a lot of groups that don't see the same things that you and I see. They're not on the same political side. And, I was always fine with, listen, log cabin Republicans. You know what? My mom was a Republican. My dad was far left Democrat, whatever floats your boat. But now we're talking about with things like Project 2025, we're talking about life and death. And we're talking about people that actually, their reaction on our side was freaked out from the election. They were just freaked out that it went that way. There is such a lack of empathy on the other side, Damon, you can't even imagine. And again, I am privy to a lot of the blogs, privy to a lot of the opinions, and any one of us, you can go on Twitter, and which is now X, and read any of these things. And you're a therapist. I just can't wrap my head around how people can be so mean and so heartless.
So that speaks, I think, to, yes, and I think that's been my whole life. I think that's always been there. And we look at the course of world history. Most of world history are groups of people saying, my life is more superior to yours, and therefore I'm going to oppress you and eventually kill you. That's sort of the way.
They don't care about you because your life doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. Where I think is unusual is that I haven't had to deal with a lot of that in my 53 years. And now we are, right? Now we're dealing with that. What do we do? Well, I think, at least from the psychological standpoint, if and when there's an opportunity, is to help people grow and understand empathy. And if people don't even get it, and if they don't even want to get it, or if their religion or their mental health issues prevent them from having a connection with other people, then just go for the facts. The price of eggs went up 56% in the last 5 weeks. Facts. Inflation is up. The stock market is down. The tariffs are crazy. This is going to hurt people, whether you care about me or not. You may hate the faggot in the bathtub, and I don't care. But the price of your eggs is going the other direction. If that's what it takes to do the right thing, then that's what it takes to get you to do the right thing. We meet people where they're at. But Wendy, you're right. For some people, that level of meeting with them where they're at is not going to be about empathy or compassion for others. They don't have it. They were not raised with it.
Right.
They were not raised with it. It's not part of their culture. It's not part of their religion. It's not part of their family. That's just not where they're at. And we are coexisting on the same land in the same country with a lot of those folks.
Right. Exactly. So in your experience, right, you've been a therapist for 28 years. How long?
Yeah. I started working as a therapist as an intern in California 28 years ago.
Okay. So what have you seen that's changed in this country in 28 years? And you froze.
What do you think it froze? I think it froze. Okay. So what I heard.
What have you seen that's changed in terms of how people are in this country in 28 years?
Well, so it's interesting because I do see changes. And believe me, back in 1996, the notion that people with HIV and AIDS were going to live, that was not part of the conversations we were having. The idea that people that were HIV negative could be empowered and have the kind of sex they want to have, when and where and how they want to have it, and not get HIV without condoms, that was nowhere near where we were. So the idea that people of the same gender could get married legally and have all the protections of the federal government, I know that we're staring that down right now, but that was nowhere in the purview back in 1996. So there are advances, there are changes. And I do feel like the young people I see who have benefited from that have had a different experience in this world where they definitely have they definitely have struggles. But the things that they haven't had to deal with is that if I fall in love I can't get married. Or if I want to be a sexual person, that I necessarily am inevitably going to get HIV. That's no longer part of the lexicon for them.
Right.
That's amazing.
Except fast forward to where we're at now and the kind of rhetoric we're hearing. How is that, do you think? Because again, you have clients coming to you, right? Your patients. What are you seeing? What are people talking about that came up during those times? You're right, where they could marry the person that they loved if they were the same sex, and they didn't have to worry about getting HIV. Now we've got all of this other stuff going on. What is some of your, and again, you're not disclosing anything personal. We're talking very general here. I know all about hip.
Anything.
But like, what have they been saying to you? What are some common things that come up?
Well, my clients, the population I serve, is definitely afraid, definitely feeling unease and some outright fear about the changes in the current administration and feeling the impact of that. And where we go back to with that is something that I learned, again, a very long time ago from my best friend who was living with HIV. He's since passed away.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, is this idea that we as human beings, most of how we experience life and most of our mental health is going to be how we react to shit we can't control. Right. And a lot of stuff we can't control. Right now, we're going through a time where on the political level, most of what's happening, pretty much all of what's happening.
Well, no, we cannot control it. That's absolutely true.
Right.
Well, I advise people that are in the arts, entertainment people, we can make it as good as it possibly can be. We can continue to create. We can take the joy from that and spread it with others. I spend a lot of time trying to do that because my nature is controlling, and this is like really out of hand. And for me personally, I've had to limit. I have to read the news because I must stay informed. I'm in this community, but I really limit it. And I don't watch it on the television where it seems like they have the sound decibel up and the intonation of the talking heads is like, and Wall Street tumbled again today. You know, that it's the words and the way they come at you. I think that is very unhealthy for people.
So that's where I go to, okay, this is a rough time. Who else in world history has gone through times like this and come through it with a sense of peace and compassion and humanity and dignity? So I go back to some of the therapists, philosophers, and spiritual teachers who have written about this over time. One of the people that stands out for me, who has always been my go-to, is named Viktor Frankl. He's a therapist who survived the concentration camps in Nazi Germany and came through it and wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, despite the pronoun, because this was like in the 1950s that he wrote this. But he talked about the experiences of being in a concentration camp and saying that no matter what they say or do to me, the one thing they cannot take is my sense of purpose and meaning and humanity. And he saw other examples of people in the concentration camps who were, assaulted, abused, stripped of every dignity, every human right, and still maintain a sense of pride and dignity and generosity and compassion for their fellow prisoners. And he came to the conclusion that the last of human freedoms is our ability to choose one's attitude in any set of circumstances, our reaction in any set of circumstances. And I thought, wow, if this guy could do this in a concentration camp, then maybe I could do it when a boy doesn't call me back, when I'm interested in somebody, or when the train is running late. It's like, maybe I can choose my attitude about the circumstances and apply that now that we're facing more grave situations in the 2020s. I also went back and read a lot of stuff that Nelson Mandela wrote about, because he was political prisoner for 28 years and still maintained that his life remained meaningful and dignified. And ultimately,
it was. And when he got out, I mean, look at how people looked at him. Yeah.
So what those examples, those are kind of extreme, but there's a lot of those examples. It says to me that the one thing that no one, I don't care who it is, I don't care what side of the political fence, the one thing no one will take from me is my mental health and my sense of meaning and my identity. No one will do it. Whatever they do to my body, they're not going to take my spirit. They can't have my mental health. I've worked too hard to get it. I've worked too hard to protect it. I don't care what Donald fucking Trump does. He's not going to reduce my sense of who I am, how I love people I love, and how I express myself. Now, whatever they do to my body, I don't know. They could take away my body. They could kill me. They could take away my rights to get married. They could take away my rights to PrEP. I'm still going to get PrEP somehow and help other people get it.
I fully believe you will. Right.
But they won't, Wendy, they won't take away the way I see myself and my identity in this world. Too late for that. They won't have that. That's the one thing they're never going to take from me. And I'm stubborn and I'm resilient about this. And I think this is the time for people to claim that. If ever there's been a time in our world to claim that, this is the time.
Grab your identity and hang on to it. It's who you are, and it's all you've got at the end of the day.
They won't take my health. They will not take my mental health at all.
Right. Do you have an easy time there's a lot of depressed people out there. You know that better than anyone. Do you have an easy time getting your clients I totally get what you're saying, and I live my life that way. Do you have an easy time getting your clients to think about that and accept it within themselves?
Yes, but that's nothing new for 2025. That's been as long as I've been practicing. It's hard to change the way they've been conditioned to think about their worth and their value and their beauty.
Right.
Because that is often conditioned, whether it's brainwashed or unconsciously conditioned by an oppressive culture that we live in. So to get people to change their thinking around these things, whether it's now or 30 years ago, has always been an uphill battle. And I do use these books, Mad Search for Meaning and Long Walk to Freedom. Tina Turner wrote a lot about this in her lifetime.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I do ask my clients to read these books, or at least read the short version of these books, to understand what some of these concepts look like in practice, how no matter what happens to us, we still have the option and the ability to maintain mental health and fitness.
And who we are. We are as people, which, sometimes that can be shaken up by what's going on around you. It's always going back, as you know, to the self and knowing who the self is and what you're going to let rock your world. I opened up by talking, I'm in the middle of construction. I am the most orderly, organized person in the world. I'm a Capricorn. That's my thing. My daughter calls me a micromanaging Capricorn. I am coming to you from a room that is going to be my new broadcast room. It's not set up yet. I'm surrounded by boxes. There is stuff everywhere. There's bags. They started the construction on Tuesday. I have to tell you, I am never a basket case. Damon, I felt like you know how you are when you have real bad jet lag and you haven't slept in 36 hours? I felt like my heart was beating less. I felt like there was a paper clip on my brain. You understand what those things are. And you know what? I said to myself, no matter what's going on, including when they started with the big drill, oh my God. I said to myself, you know what? This is all around you. It's outside of you. You just have to soldier through and get through your day no matter how you can. Took my dog out for a walk. The weather was nice. Passed people in the street, smiled at them. We do have control.
Yeah. And that, again, I love that you're saying that, because I know you have survived so much in life, but this stuff gets really annoying. And I think that happens when any of us on some level have what I call a should attached to the way things should be, or the noise or the chaos. And unfortunately, this world is not going to line up with our shoulds.
Right.
For at least half of us, half of the voting population. So what we can do is still challenge and change the shoulds in order to obtain and access some semblance of peace of mind. And it's often in that peace of mind and mental health that we make clearer decisions about what to do with the chaos, or what to do in terms of political activism, or how to express our political feelings constructively, or how to manage when your own home is just in utter disarray. But we have to, or if we don't have to, but if we're going to do that, it means on some level challenging and changing some of the shoulds, some of the control that we think we should have about what's happening.
Right. But you're talking about, the whole thing, control, when we lose control, right? For me, that's something I really had to work on, because I like to have that. I like to know I'm in charge, and that, you know what? Right. But we can't always have it. So here we are. I'm in a mess and you're in the tub, and we're having a great conversation. Doesn't get any better than that. Now I'm going to get a little personal. Are you cold? Are you cold right now?
No. So the heat stays. I have a tub where the heat stays for like a couple hours. So
Really? Do you
I
see?
get the tub and I'm
have
like,
a
good to go.
special tub?
Yeah, the heat, it retains heat very well.
You have a heat retaining tub, as you should. So, one of the areas I know I love you. One of the areas I know you work in is aging, right? And I wanted to talk to you about that because in America, we have such incredible reverie for the young, and the old. It's like I think they used to point to the Alaskan culture, and I don't know that this is even true, but they would put you on an ice floe and send you out to sea. I feel that's what we do in our culture. Like, we find a place for mom or whatever. What kinds of advice do you give people about aging?
To me, celebratory empowered aging really boils down to three areas. And I want to preface, I'm 53 now. I came out when I was 17 years old. There really weren't older gay people or role models, or rarely did I ever find mentors.
Absolutely.
Couldn't be out, or when they did come out, they often were sick or died of HIV and AIDS. So I didn't really have a cohort or a generation to guide me through this. And I really didn't know if I was going to live to see 50, because I didn't know whether for violence or AIDS or whatever was going to happen, if I was going to live. But here I am, 53, and I made it. And I feel so celebratory about that. And why I feel celebratory about that has to do with, I feel like, kind of the power, the purpose, and the pleasure of being older. When I say power, I don't mean like power over others, but I mean the inner power, like the sense I know who I am, no matter what anyone thinks of me. It's like, I know who I am. I know my identity. I really, really like this Damon guy now. And like, that's something I feel really calm in the midst of the chaos and the storm. I have that power that guides me. The purpose, I wake up every day and try to figure out what to do with my power. How can I most constructively do the work that I'm here to do? Work like spirit work, whether that's activism or sitting in my therapist's office or sitting in a bathtub or canvassing, knocking on doors. But how do I express the power?
Oops, and you froze again. It must be cold in that
during
tub.
the day. And then I never want to forget the pleasure, because I do feel like this gets left out of the conversation about aging so often, is that we often, especially in older ages, understand our body so much better. I understand my body so much better than I did when I was younger.
I completely agree with that. And we appreciate, how when you're younger, you'll look at your own image and it's not right. It's not good enough. It's not right enough. You're not thin enough, or tiny enough, or too tall. But when you get more accepting about this vessel that you live in as you get older, and appreciate it.
Yeah, and appreciate other people's too. So pleasure can be sexual or erotic, but it can be anything you do that gives you a sense of being alive. It can be, bungee jumping. It can be checkers. It can be anything that gives you a sense of being alive. For me and for a lot of my community, we talk about the erotic component. And
it's huge in the gay community.
Right.
Although now you're getting me off of age, and I can ask you this question. A number of the gay male friends I have that are, in an older age category, that are looking for meaningful relationships, and they're on these dating sites, they really, really hate getting the dick pic. What is that about?
Wait, they hate getting dick pics?
Yeah, dick pics. Yeah, there's a lot of people, Damon, honestly, and I'm female, and they'll talk to me. They want, they want to meet someone for lunch. They don't. When you're in bed with somebody, those kinds of things count. But when you're first like doing the courting online or whatever, this is something that I noticed that gay men will do, and women. I can't see a woman sending a picture of her vajayjay to somebody else. I can't, right? Work with me on this. Stay with me on this. But yet, gay men do that all the time. Explain that.
Right. So that changed. You asked me earlier what's changed. That has changed so much. 30 years ago, before we had social media, before we had phones, there was that idea of what is private, and you didn't want to send pictures of penis out there, because what if it got out there? And what I like about today is that nobody cares. Like, because you're right, it's so ubiquitous. Penises, people just send their penises everywhere. It doesn't matter anymore.
The
Like,
penis are flying all over. You press forward and there it goes.
it goes there. Everyone's doing it. So no one can be stigmatized for it because everyone's doing it. Now, on the other side of that, consent is still important. Consent is still essential. You don't want to be sending dick pics or genital pics unless you have that person's consent. And
do you think you should say, "Mother, may I"?
Well, I think if you don't want that, given that that's now the norm, and if you're not feeling it, which is fine, but you can protect your space, you can protect your boundaries. You're going to want to be on social media or on Grindr or whatever, and put that in your profile. Please, no unsolicited dick pics. I
like that. I'm going to share that with people because you brought out a really good point, especially with some older gay men. You're right. Before the pictures could be exchanged, right? It was phone calls or meetups or whatever. Now all that's changed. So it is a bit of a free for all to send those pictures around. If you don't want one, you got to put that in your profile and say, hey, no unsolicited.
Right. A lot of people now send them out just as a matter of course, because depending on the context, depending on the form, like Grindr or Scruff, I think it's expected. Some people get upset if you don't send them out. So it's really important people be clear and respectful of their boundaries and communicate effectively when they have boundaries around this. And it's fine to have boundaries. It's okay. Please. I think it's really important for everybody to have their no. But if people don't know your no, they're going to not know how to respect your no.
No, and you've got to be the one to tell them. But it is still interesting to me that a number of women that I've spoken to about this, women aren't sending pictures of their vajayjays on social media. So like, what is it like with the male female thing that, what do you think?
Well, that's a really great question.
I think about these things, Damon. I wake me up at 2:00 in the morning. I need answers. Like, why?
As someone who does naked bathtub interviews, I think about it. I couldn't have ever done this before I turned 50. I could never have had this interview with you, even though I'm not even, I'm naked here, but you can't see it all.
I don't believe you're naked. I believe you have trousers on. And no, it's okay. It's all good.
Okay. But I would, because again, what I like is that we're living in a time, even though we have problems, where culturally we seem to be more tolerant of nudity in the US in a way that other countries typically are. Most places in Europe, nudity is fine.
Right, topless was always accepted there on the beach or whatever, right?
Nudity is fine. It's in the US, there's been such a hang up, and I'm really glad that we seem to be working through that. Now, again, I think for gay men, there's an extra cultural component that we've had in terms of nudity, eroticism, porn, where we often have a relationship with the body and other people's bodies that's very celebratory and maybe sometimes ideal, like in a way that may not be healthy. In other words, sometimes people are what we call size queens, and if they're only looking for a certain length or girth of erect penis, then they're going to judge or stigmatize people who don't have that. And I don't think that's healthy either. But I will say what I think is interesting within the queer community is that there is sort of been a tolerance and acceptance for sharing nudity. At least in my circles, there always has been. We just didn't have the technology for this until fairly recently. But I am someone who's always been very comfortable with nudity, gone to naked parties, felt very comfortable in clothing optional spaces because I think the human body in all shapes and sizes is absolutely beautiful.
Well,
I think all bodies are
accepting of not only your body, but of other people's bodies as well.
Yes, I love all bodies. All bodies.
You love all bodies. So, my God, we've only got a couple of minutes left. So how did you come up with your tub show? What went on in your head that you knew you had to do this?
Well, in the spring, exactly 4 years ago, spring of 2021, when I was turning 50, I wrote a series of essays called The 50 Lessons of 50, 50 Things I Learned About Turning 50, the Power, the Purpose, the Pleasure. And after that, I was like, okay, I've yapped enough. Now I want to listen. I want to hear other people. I want to talk to other people, other New Yorkers, about what their experiences are aging, what their fears and hopes are with aging. And, it was just in spring of 2021 when we were starting to feel comfortable in social spaces again. So I thought, could I do a naked show with no mask, no underwear, less than 6 feet apart? Would anybody even want to do this? And much to my surprise and delight, so many people in New York, including our friend Tim Moss, and many others.
No, Tim would love this. Absolutely.
He was an early guest and just said yes. And Anu came
Of
up.
course he was. I loved him.
So I love that. And I was just so grateful that, like, wow, people are open and willing to normalize nudity and have these deeper conversations about what we're doing and how we can contribute to the world in a meaningful way in a bathtub space. And that has just been so much my vibe my whole life, is having these really interesting naked conversations with other people.
I totally love it, and the rest is history. You know, it's interesting though for you and my podcast came out of the pandemic also.
Yeah.
So did yours.
Yeah.
You know, in a different way than mine did. So, what is next for you, Damon? What do you want next? What do you want to tell everybody?
Well, inspired by this moment we're in, I am really thinking about how we can create content and community around choosing mental health. And it goes back to some of the referrals. You know, I told you I've always used Viktor Frankl and Nelson Mandela and John Lewis and Tina Turner and many others as sort of the basis of the work I do. Now more than ever, their message is timely and relevant. We always choose mental health. And if we don't choose it intentionally, the default setting is to go into catastrophe and worry and depression and anxiety. And that's not going to serve. We're going to get to the other side of the mess we're in now. The question is, what kind of shape and mental shape are we going to be in?
Right. Because when we get to the other side, we've got to be whole.
We want to be in fairly good working order, physically, mentally, not too addicted to drugs and chemicals, and in pretty good shape so that we can be ready and prepared to enjoy what's going to happen next. And I do believe, Wendy, with all of my heart and soul, there is a good side to this. 20 years ago, we were going crazy because George W. got inaugurated with control of the House and the Senate, and that led the path to see Barack Obama come through the political ranks and be nominated and elected president twice. So I believe we are getting prepared for something really, really positive on the other side of this. But we want to make sure our body, minds, and spirits are in good shape so we can enjoy it by the time the party starts.
I love it. That's a t-shirt. We want to make sure our body, minds, and spirits are in good shape for when the party starts. And on that note, I always like to end my show by taking a picture of my guest. Can you put some suds on you? Do you have any suds left?
I do. That's
good. We have suds. Okay.
Am I in the frame?
Wait, yeah, get him up there. Yeah, I need to see him like on camera. Okay. Maybe under your chin a little bit.
I still got some suds.
I love, oh my God, that's so cute. Damon, thank you. You're just terrific. I'd love to be on your show at some
Come
point.
over.
The weather's got to get warmer. I don't like
we'll talk about it.
I chill easily.
It's warm. It's so warm in here right now.
Thank you so much. And we will all be in touch soon. We have so many mutuals. It's crazy.
Yes. Wendy, thank you for everything you're doing to make our world a brightful, colorful, beautiful place.
Well, same for you. And anyone who's been watching tonight, go take a nice hot bath. Put some Epsom salts in there. I hope we inspired you. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.